Oliver Ellsworth was the third Chief Justice of the United States. He was born on April 29, 1745, in Windsor, Connecticut. His mother is Jemima Ellsworth, and his father, David Ellsworth, was a very prosperous farmer. During his teenage years, he was sent to a boarding school. Ellsworth entered Yale University, but after his sophomore year enrolled to the College of New Jersey, which was now known as Princeton University. During his time in the universities, he studied theology and got his A.B. degree, but then later left his religious studies to study law for 4 years. After he passed his bar, he married Abigail Wolcott. In 1777, he became the state's attorney for the county of Hartford. The same year, he represented Connecticut as a member of the Continental Congress. In the Continental Congress, he was appointed to multiple committees, including the Board of Treasury and the Committee of Appeals. After he left the Continental Congress, he returned to Connecticut and served in the Governor's Council. In 1786, he was appointed to Connecticut's Superior Court. In 1787, he again represented Connecticut during the Constitutional Convention during the debate on the Great Compromise. Ellsworth served on the Committee of Five, which was the committee that made the first draft for the Constitution. In the new federal government, Ellsworth served as one of Connecticut's first senators. In 1796, George Washington appointed him as the Chief Justice because John Rutledge failed to receive Senate confirmation and William Cushing had declined. One of his landmark Supreme Court cases was United States v. Isaac Williams in 1799, which applied in the United States the common law rule, where that a citizen may not extradite himself without the consent of his government. In 1799, he accepted President John Adams' request to join commissioners going to France to negotiate a treaty with Napoleon, where he persuaded Napoleon to accept a compromise to end an undeclared war between the U.S. and France. During his time of France is when he sent his resignation as Chief Justice. He died in 1807 in his hometown of Windsor.
The United States versus Nixon was a landmark court case between Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, against the Supreme Court. This occurred on July the 8th, 1974, and ended 2 weeks and 2 days later, on July the 24th. The question of this case was whether the President has the right to safeguard information using his executive privilege that is needed for a court of law to follow through. This case originated from the Watergate scandal, a scandal where Richard Nixon recorded several conversations on audio tapes that have taken place in the Oval Office. When the Supreme Court called these recordings forward, Nixon responded by using his executive privilege, stopping the subpoena from calling tapes forward to be used in the court. This caused many to think that the executive privilege had too much power to it, and whether or not it was immune to a judicial review. In other words, it was too powerful to be used fairly within the process of law carried out by the Supreme Court daily. The conclusion of the case was that the court held Nixon, or any president for that matter, could not use their executive privilege in this way. The court argued that there was limited privilege used in areas of the military or diplomatic affairs. Also said was a president's privilege could not interfere with the fair administration of justice. Overall, this limited the use a president has for an executive privilege. The conclusion led to President Nixon to release the tapes he recorded and followed the subpoena placed on them. Shortly after the tapes were released, President Nixon resigned from office, ending his term and having Gerald Ford become the next president in line.